Hi makers, I'm Shakira aka Creative Shack, and I'm here with Love Crafts, breaking down some advanced embroidery stitches to help you up your embroidery game. Okay, so first things first, let's get our fabric onto our embroidery hoop. So we just pop our fabric over the top of the inner hoop and the outer hoop goes over the top, and give it a little tighten if you need to, and then just pull in the fabric taut around, just making sure there are no dips in the fabric and it's nice and taut on there. And then we're ready for our first stitch. So the first stitch that I'm going to talk about is the couching stitch, and now that is the stitch that I used to create this pattern here. I used it on all of the hair of this piece, and the great thing about couching stitch is it means that you can form continuous lines without having any breaks in it. It's the perfect stitch if you're doing lettering or borders and you just want to create that illusion of a continuous line. So I've cut myself 2 lengths of thread, and I'm just using 2 different colours so that you can see the contrast in the stitches and exactly what I'm doing. So what I do is, for that stitch I would split my embroidery floss and I would just take 1 strand of it, and then this would be acting as either floss as it is, or maybe it's cord or whatever it is that you're using. We can keep that the thickness that it is, because you might have something that's thicker. And I thread a needle, thread that in needle size like 24, and then I would thread a smaller needle with our 1 strand of thread. To begin with, we need to bring our thicker thread, which this is our yellow one, up to the front of the fabric, and we just lay it down exactly how we want it to be. With our fine needle, we're now going to couch this stitch, this yellow thread, using our 1 strand. So we would come up, making sure that we miss all of the threads, and then we would go back down into the same hole that we've just come up in. So we're going back down in there. And then back down into that same hole there. Now if you wanted to create loops or swirls, you would just take this, create the wave or the swirl that you want. So if we wanted it to be like this, say, and then just pop a few stitches down to keep that secure. So it was like that. Back down into that same hole there. And then you could just give it a little, readjust it just so that it's lying exactly how you want it to. Just like that. So up on the other side. And then back down. And then to finish off that top thread that we were holding in place, we now just put that back into the fabric, and then we knot it at the back, and that's our couching stitch there. So here in this example, you can see just how you can use that couching stitch to get really, really nice curls and swirls and squiggles without having any breaks in your lines, and it just looks like one continuous line. So the next stitch that I'm going to talk to you about is called a braided stitch. So to begin, I need to draw myself a couple of lines onto my fabric. So we're going to put our needle, bring it up at one of our lines up through the fabric. And then from here, we need to loop it. So we want to loop it like that. And you might have to hold on to it because the thread just sometimes doesn't like to sit still. So there we go. So that's our loop. So then from here we need to put our needle through that loop and then into the other line, the other side of our line, and into the fabric. We give that a little pull like that, and then you can see it starting to wrap around. And then the needle comes out on the other side of our line that we've created out of the fabric, and we wrap this thread behind the needle like that, and then pull our needle all the way through. And that is our first braided stitch. So we do it again. We create a loop, and the loop twists to the right. So it goes like that. Our needle goes inside that loop and into the fabric. We pull the thread, loop it around that needle, and then bring our needle back out on the other side of our fabric on the top part of our line, and that thread goes behind our needle to finish off, and we pull it all through. So if you run out of thread halfway through your stitch, all you need to do is thread yourself another bit of thread in your needle, and then you're basically going to come up through this gap here in your previous stitch. So if I come up, so it's up through that hole that you're going to come up, and then you're going to continue to do the same thing, creating your loop, get your needle through, millimetre apart there, and then up through the top line. Thread goes behind the needle and all out again. And that's how you continue. So we've come to the end of our line now, and then we just want to finish off, and we're just going to tuck that needle behind our previous stitch and bring it through, and there you go. So the next stitch that I'm going to talk you through is called a bullion knot stitch, and this stitch is a decorative stitch, but it can be worked in a couple of different ways, which I would like to show you. So we're going to come up in our fabric, and then from here we need to measure the length of how big we want the bullion knot to be. So I would say we'll go in here, so that's about maybe 1/2 centimetre or something. You can do it as long as you want it, really. It's up to you. So we then go back up out of the fabric at the same point that we entered before. We leave the needle there, and what we do is, I'm just going to put my work down and I'm going to hold my needle with one hand or one finger, and we're going to do a series of wraps around the needle. So we're going to do it about 6 times, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm just eyeballing this length to this length, and I think I'm going to do 2 more. So 6, 7, 8. So 8 times wrapping it round. We don't want to pull these curls around the needle too tight, because then the needle won't be able to come out of it very easily. So we try to keep it a bit loose. So I'm just going to loosen it a little bit like that. And then I'm going to help the needle to come all the way through while still keeping my finger there to keep my my coil secure and together. And I'm just going to pull whilst also bringing it all down. So I've got them in the other hand, you can see. And I'm just going to check it as well, actually. Let's see what's happened. So it's unraveled a little bit, but that's fine, because if it does unravel, we could just reposition everything and just bring them all down. And keep feeding it through. There we go. And then we need to help it to lay flat. So with the other hand, just gently bringing all of the coils down the thread. So there it is there. We then finish off by putting our needle back down just inside where the thread is going in. So just there. There we go. So the next stitch we're going to talk about is the fishbone stitch. The fishbone is like a chevron which you lay down, and each time it meets in the middle. So to start off, I've got my leaf shape drawn on there, and you have your design already drawn on with your space. So we start off by coming up through the fabric at the point of the top point of the leaf, and then we go down just slightly, maybe 1/2 centimetre, going back into the fabric. We then go up through the fabric on one of the sides of our leaf shape, and we then go back down into the fabric at the point where we just left, so just below that stitch there. So just below. You go over to the other side as well, coming out, and then back down just below the point of that last stitch that we did. And there you can see the beginning of the leaf just starting to emerge. So it's just going to be a case of working from one side to the other, bringing your needle up through the fabric on one side, back down at the center, back out on the other side, down to center, and we just keep repeating this until we fill the whole space. Our next stitch is called a twisted chain stitch, and I'm going to show you how to do the stitch along with how to apply the stitch to some work that I'm already doing. So you're going to come up through your fabric. You're going to go just a little bit down from that point where you just came out of. So back into the fabric and then back out about, what is that, like a mil or two coming out. And then from here you want to take the thread and bring it behind your needle. Okay, so there's where it's coming out of, and you're bringing it behind the needle there, and then you're going to pull it all through. Like that. And then when you come to do the next stitch, now where though that kind of crosses, those two bits of thread cross, that's where you're going to put your needle, right behind that cross there, and then back out again a mil or two just below. So just below the loop. You're then going to take your thread and wrap it around your needle or behind your needle and pull through. Just like that. So it goes right behind that cross and then back out again. Wrap the thread behind the needle and pull through. Behind, back out, wrap behind the needle and pull through. Behind, back out, wrap behind and pull through. So I just want to give you an idea of how you can use the twisted chain stitch for your design. So here you can see I've got my buttonhole stitch, my blanket stitch, and I've created a design with this, and then I've gone around it with the twisted chain. So another great stitch for creating really interesting flowers. Also using a kind of weave-in method is your woven wheel. You just basically weave in a circular motion, and it creates really lovely flowers, and you can team it up with your fishbone leaves and some French knots as well to really make it pop. So I just start off by drawing a circle with 5 points inside of it, and I've drawn the points at 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock. We then are going to stitch those points with our needle and thread. So we just come up there. And also, you don't have to make your points meet in the middle. They can just end here, because then you have enough space to add in any French knots or anything decorative in the middle. So you don't have to go all the way to the center, and I'm not going to go to the center. So we just stitch these in. And with the woven wheel as well, you can do it as tightly or as loose as you like. A loose effect will give you a much more fuller flower, and obviously a tighter one will just look a bit more tighter, but it just depends on the look that you are aiming to achieve. So I've done my final one there. So from here we need to come up in one of the holes that we've already stitched, and then from here we're now gonna weave in a circular motion. So we're gonna go under, over, under, over, under, and just adjusting everything. So we went under, over, under, over, under, over. So as it begins to go around, you'll need to just keep placing the threads in place. And I'm not pulling it too tight because I just really want to get a nice full flower. So I've filled in and almost coming to the end of my thread. So what do? We're almost running out of thread. So where we last left off, I would just go underneath the work just a little bit and pull that through. Knot at the back and thread yourself some more thread. So where we left off, we went under, and we could just actually come up just where we left off. Okay, so we're coming to the end of weaving all of our woven wheel, and I'm just going to take this moment now to just make any kind of adjustments with my needle, pulling any of the threads how I would like them to sit, lifting them, loosening them, tightening them, whatever it is that you feel how you want this stitch to sit. And once you're happy with it, you can then take your needle and just put the thread behind and knot it at the back, and that completes the woven wheel part of it. And then what I'm going to do is you could add in some French knots into the center just to complete the flower itself. So I'm going to talk to you about the blanket stitch or buttonhole stitch. Now it's the same stitch. One you would have definitely seen on the edges of blankets or felt toys, and the other similar to a satin stitch, only it has a bit of a knot on the top of each stitch. One's wider, one's shorter. So you're going to come up on the side that you want the edging to be on. You're going to go back down into the fabric on the other side of your line, and then back out of your fabric on the other side, top side. And this bit of thread here must go behind your needle, and then you pull it out. Like so. So I'm going to show you first of all in the wide style so that you can see what the stitch actually looks like. And this is the way that it would be done if it was on the top of blankets, or imagine you was making some felt Christmas decorations or felt beanie dolls or something like that. So you go in on the bottom line and then out on the top, wrapping behind the thread, the top thread behind you, behind the needle, like that. So to finish off, we're going to just do this last stitch, which is going to sit right behind. So right, there's our last stitch here. We're just going to go right next to it like that. Put the thread back through the fabric and hold that in place like that. And that is our blanket or buttonhole stitch. Needle weaving is a great fill-in stitch, and you can do it really tightly or you could do it really loose. It adds really nice texture to your work. So I'm going to show you some examples of what I mean. So first of all, one example of needle weaving is here. You can see that in this abstract piece I've used it just to fill a few areas. It's here and there's some here as well. So you could create really nice texture. Another example is this here, where I've used it for this basket area here. So, and I've done it a bit more loose than I did in the other piece that I showed you. But it just depends on how you want your needle weaving to be. And it's exactly the same principle as if you were weaving on a loom. We're just going to do a couple of stitches to start off, which will be acting as our warp threads. So I've put in just a couple of lines just as a guide, but obviously you would have your design that you'll be working within. So we'll put one there. And also you can do the width of your warp threads, really depends on the overall look that you want to achieve. You could have them really close together, or you could have them really far apart. You could also have more than one thread, you know, as your warp thread. So I'm saying you could have 1, 2 and 3 threads, and then 3 threads and then a space and then 3 threads again and then a space and then 3 threads again. You could do it that way. It really all just comes down to how you want the overall look to be. So I'm kind of just using my eye to measure the spaces between each one of these threads. And just do my last one there. And then I'm going to come up just over here so that I can now begin to weave in and out of these threads. And I'm going to turn it around like this as well, actually. So you know how to weave under, over, under, over. So we're going to keep doing that. So we're going over, under that one, under and over. And that's our first one. I think I might just spin this around now. And then go under, over, under, over and under. Now, really important that you watch your tension. You don't want to pull it too much and then you start to get this tapering of your warp threads, so you don't want that to happen. So just don't pull it too tight. So I'm just using my needle to bring the threads down and then over, under, over, under, over, pull through. And I'm going to just gently come in there, bring those threads down, and just gently pulling it. I don't want to make it so that it comes in too much. And then we're going to go the other way. So under, over, under, over, under. Okay, so we're just coming to the end of this now, and I'm going to try and get in as many rows as I can to finish this off. I don't want it to be too tightly packed, so I'm just going to keep checking. I think I'll do one more because I can just see at the top there's just a little bit of space. So we go doing the same thing, over, under, over, under. I think that's good. And then to just finish off, we do as we would if we ran out of a thread, and we just go just like that. So our next stitch is called a ring picot stitch, and it can be used as a really nice decorative piece and also to create flowers. So I'm going to take you through that and also show you some examples. In addition to your needle and thread that you're going to be working with, you're going to need to get yourself either a thicker needle or like a cocktail stick or something like that to use in addition. To begin, and I'm going to turn my work around like this actually, we come up through our fabric and decide how long we want this ring picot to be, going back in and coming out where we started here. So we're not pulling the needle all the way through. At this point now we need to introduce our additional needle or cocktail stick in, because we're going to create a series of loops which will be put onto this needle up here. So it's going to be almost like knitting, which is why they probably call it cast on, because it is like you're casting on. So you're going to take your thread, and that's the thread that's coming out of the fabric from this point. You're going to take your thread and you're going to twist it around your finger so that you just create this cross here. You're then going to twist that cross just once like that, and then you're going to put that loop onto the needles and pull that down like that. So that's our first one. So again, we're going to cross it, twist it, and put it onto our needle. So we're going to do just like we had our bullion knot stitch. We're going to do, I think, about 6 or 7 of these loops. So we cross, we twist, and we put that onto our needle. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've got 7 on there. At this point, we can remove that additional needle so that can come out. And we're now just going to feed our needle out of the fabric and through all of these loops that we've just created. So just very gently pulling them out and also holding those loops into place. Pull it all the way through. So then at this point you can see those are all your loops that you've created. There they are. So if we pull a bit more, and then we just put that needle back down into the fabric so that it's away. And that is just reposition everything so that you want all of the knots to be on the outside. And that is your ring picot. So I'm going to do it another time. So we come up through our fabric, back down, and this time actually let's do more loops but a shorter distance. So coming up through. Okay, we now need to bring in our extra needle and do our loops. So we go cross, twist onto the needle and pull, cross, loop or twist, sorry, and onto the needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we've got 10 on there. Remove that additional needle, and then we're gonna very gently bring the needle out. So we can see all of our loops are on there. Pulling it through, holding it secure at the same time. And those loops, they will naturally just want to go with the knotted edge going out. So we just need to position everything now. Okay, that looks good. And we're just going to go back down. There we go. You can have long distance ones, short distance, thicker ones, small ones, and that's the finished ones. So that was some advanced embroidery stitches for you that are really going to enhance your design work and your projects moving forward. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you and happy crafting.